You are listening to When Life Gives You Lemons, the podcast that speaks to high-performing individuals who have been through adversity but come back stronger. I'm your host, Emma Levy, a physiotherapist who has helped elite athletes on their way to Olympic success. This podcast was born following my own trauma when I was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of only 36. Sat in the chemo chair, I set myself the goal of starting a podcast to explore resilience and the importance of mindset. Before I introduce today's guest, I just want to take a quick moment to thank you for listening. This is now season 6 of When Life Gives You Lemons, and I couldn't have done it without my listeners. So if you enjoy listening, please do remember to press the follow button. Also, a reminder that you can watch all of our episodes on YouTube, and you can subscribe there as well to make sure you don't miss any of our content. You can also follow us on Instagram at Life Lemons Podcast. And did I tell you, I've also started motivational speaking, so check out www.emmalevy.me for more information. Now on with this week's show. Today I'm welcoming Scott Britton to the podcast. Scott is the co-founder of Battle Cancer, the world's biggest functional fitness cancer fundraising organisation. Prior to setting it up, he had an illustrious career in the police force. And today I want to ask Scott how his background as a policeman, as well as his challenging upbringing from a rough neighbourhood in Manchester, has impacted his life and the transformation that he has been on to get where he is today. Scott, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to finally meet properly, because in 2023 at Battle Cancer London, I spent a day interviewing your colleagues and some of the participants, and everyone spoke so highly of you.
Because I paid them. Don't believe them.
And, you know, on a personal level, I'm blown away by Battle Cancer and what you guys do. But can you tell us, and can you tell our listeners what actually Battle Cancer is?
Yeah, of course. I think, first of all, that's very kind. I think let's just also address the giant fundraising elephant in the room of how incredible you've had an impact on people. And also just that day was really life-changing for a lot of people, you coming and spending that time with them, you know, I think. So I know this isn't just to tell you how great you are, but I think it needs to be addressed that, you know, you set up this podcast and you interview people, and, you know, for the reasons that you mentioned at the beginning of your introduction, you spoke to many people that haven't had a voice for a long time during that day. People who were given the time to speak about journeys and to speak about themselves and speak about their loved ones. And that was incredibly impactful. So I think, like, although that was kind of, I know you doing your side job, everybody who kind of taken part in that talked about how much of an impact it was to them. So then, let alone the sheer amount of challenges and fundraising you've done, which are unreal. I think the single biggest we've ever had now, like somebody previously had done about 45,000 at an event. We're bringing in your total. So you are effectively the Battle Cancer World Champion. So we're going to have to get you some kind of medal for that.
I've never won anything.
But to section into what Battle Cancer is, so it's set up as a vehicle to fundraise. It's an event that's evolved in its nature and will probably continue to evolve with the trends of fitness and the way that people like to challenge themselves. But it will always stay the same, that the whole idea is that there's an equal footing, that everybody who takes part, regardless of age, ability, sporting background, will be able to do a set of movements next to and side by side to another person who can also do some movements, but scored, timed, judged, however you want to say it, but that there'll be a huge element of that's to do with fundraising. So regardless of anything and the kind of various ways that challenge has been made, there's always fundraising amounts that they choose for any charity that they want to. We obviously work with charity partners that will come towards their score. So we wanted to gamify, we wanted to reward fundraising, we wanted to shine a light on people that do physical challenges, but maybe are not the most successful athletes, but show how successful they are in fundraising and in caring and impact. Side to that, we also created in 2020, when COVID hit, a post-cancer rehabilitation program. Tons of those out there in the world, but not many that directly go through gyms. They predominantly sit in, you know, health institutions and have kind of historically been very underwhelming. They're for the very worst of rehabilitation, in the sense of it's stand up, sit down in a chair. So some people obviously start at that point, but there's a huge subsection of those that live with cancer afterwards, you know, or ongoing treatment, who want to be challenged, they want to get their strength back, they want to get rid of that chronic fatigue, they want to reintroduce mobility into their lives. So as well as having the events that fundraise for multiple charities, we set up the program, which now has had we've had 200 plus people this year alone. So I think we're topping over 1,000 people in terms of who've been through the program, graduated. We've had locations all across the world. So we're kind of dual in that sense of fundraising, growing impact from physical attendance at events, but then also our post-cancer program.
The Battle Cancer program that you talk about, I think that for me, it feels so powerful because, well, I know that I was lucky enough when I was going through my treatment that actually where I was having radiotherapy, they gave exercise rehab. And it was very, very rare at that point to be able to receive exercise rehab. And it just made me feel like normal again, you know? And I remember there was a leg press exercise and I got to the point where I was pushing the full stack of weights. And they said to me like, oh gosh, no one's ever been able to push all the weights. But that's what I love about what you guys do is that actually because you're doing it in a gym, you are able to really push people. And, I heard that day when I was interviewing, I heard the unbelievable increases in strength that those cancer patients are making on your programs. And it's kind of like they're achieving like 1.5 times their body weight squats and stuff like that, aren't they?
Yeah, in 12 weeks, which I think, it shows the program isn't magic. It's not, it's put together through different modalities. It's put together from research to look on how to introduce strength to people who've had impact on the body, looking at mobility and the impact of scarring or certain surgeries. So it's got a medical and scientific background to some of the elements that we use. But what we create isn't anything that's like a magic secret. It's basically people in a room with a coach who are supported by other people in a room who understand what they've been through. So 90% of that result is from the mindset of the person who comes in and just freeing that mindset. You know more than anybody, once you're diagnosed, you're kind of told what's happening with your life, you're told what's happening with your body so much that once you be able to take control of that, the kind of limits come off. And I think that's pretty much the reason why it's so successful is the coaches and the people that participate, is their effort and energy. Because 12 weeks isn't actually a very long time in terms of physical transformation of anything, certainly. Also, the main element, what we're trying to prove there is, yes, we want to help people on a daily basis, but we also want to try and prove to the medical community that fitness, strength and conditioning should be prescribed as medicine. It's a long old trope, but we still face times where particularly GPs will say, oh, I'm not too sure to the person, or they'll say, oh, I don't recommend you do that, or it could be unsafe. Those things it could be unsafe to step out your door in London. You could be unsure to get on a bus in case it breaks down. That's kind of how life is. But what we find more and more is the results we gather in that consultants, the experts in the field back those, and working with different universities that they use that to prove the point that it does work. So yeah, we didn't create anything that was life changing in the way it's written. The life-changing things happen with the coaches and the participants.
Yeah, and it's giving people the confidence. I think, that is just massive, giving those participants the confidence that they can do something. But you talked about my fundraising at the beginning. Just tell me, though, how much has Battle Cancer now fundraised in total?
Yeah, and so I'll always preface that because it's our Battle Cancer athletes, because everyone always says, oh, you've raised X amount on things like podcasts and stuff. And I go, no, I haven't. No, the people who've done our events have, I haven't. So all in all, now with the year, we're just sitting under about 8 million, which is a phenomenal amount and more than I could have ever imagined, in all honesty, of what the events could have done. But I would still say it falls short of where we want to be. So, we routinely now from the events fundraise over 1.2 for the past 2 years. It's been kind of 1.3 plus. But we want to be hitting, how do we hit 2 million a year? There's really big events out there. There's really big moments that fundraise 5, 10, particularly each year. So we're still on a path. So whilst I'm very proud of what's been achieved, I'm never happy. There's always room for us to do significantly better. And it's not the athletes. We need to grow the events more. We need to advertise them more. We need to make them even more attractive. We need to get even more communities involved in those, because once people do, like you, they do phenomenal things. So I need to make the ship a little bit bigger and fill it with even more people.
But what actually set you down the path of setting up Battle Cancer? Because I don't believe you necessarily had a direct relationship, like you hadn't had cancer yourself, or no one close to you had anyone had cancer. Like what drove you to start it, I suppose?
Yeah, if I had a quid for every time I've been asked that, I probably wouldn't need to do Battle Cancer anymore. It's not as a deep connection as many people would think. Growing up, I just had not the most fantastic childhood. Most people didn't, like boohoo to me, but it was just what it was. But the one person who was in my life who was really kind of consistent was not my biological grandfather, but effectively a grandfather. He had cancer, saw him kind of very quickly taken, but also just saw the strength and love and support that he still showed. And then just throughout my life, just knowing people who'd had cancer, watching the physical effects on particularly a couple of people who were very strong. So people who were, one guy I knew who was a winchman in the Navy, saved people from the ocean, from gigantic waves and things. So people who were like kind of pillars of strength, watching them, deteriorate and watching the families affected and them seeing the charities that supported them. That was really the first kickoff. So seeing Macmillan in the UK, which was kind of just this constant support and care, and they seem to be able to get people through some of these really tough times. And then through sport, I was like, well, I want to try and do something. I just, unlike you, who did phenomenally, I couldn't raise a lot of money on my own. It wasn't something that I could kind of do. So I thought, well, if I can raise 500 a year, but there's 1,000 of me, well then suddenly 1,000 times 500 is something that is really impactful. So that was kind of the idea. Went from trying to do something every year to bringing people together on a multiple. Was like, actually this is the solution that we can do. And that's what kicked it off. First of all, we did a lifting challenge that we call Raise the Titanic. It was to deadlift the weight of the Titanic. So something very traditionally, charity fundraising, cheesy, that you could see it and it was a total and that kind of thing. But it was really successful. The year before I'd done, like say, 500 quid of fundraising. The year after it was like 40,000. So there was a kind of proofing case that if we brought people together, we could really do something wonderful. So the kind of next evolution to that was, okay, how do we make it accessible? Because not everybody can lift and not everyone can lift heavy. So how do we do that? And that's where it evolved and came from. But I just like solving problems, and it's a big problem, and it's a problem that I saw affect a lot of people and continue to. And I think the more people I've met through the journey, the more it's like ignited the fire to grow and do even more, really.
And I have listened to other interviews with you, and I've read interviews with you that do talk about, like you said, you had a tough childhood, but were you always a sporty kid? Like, was sport always an escape for you, or not so much?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like as an early kid, I was super little chunky puppy fat. So it wasn't, I wasn't super sporty from sort of primary school, but by the time secondary school came around, yeah, I was very good at rugby, very good at football, very good at like athletics. I'd taken myself to a Muay Thai gym and like learned a lot of discipline and training and support around martial arts and did that for many years whilst doing other sports. So it was a very successful, it was very stable. There was always very positive role models in my life, from coaches to, gym owners, from then transitioning to training to fight and stuff like that. So it balanced out what I'd seen from the home life, that the world wasn't all terrible just because some certain people were, that there was plenty of wonderful people out there, and also the connections and lessons that you learn through sport are huge for anybody, regardless of whether you're successful in it or not. I think that doesn't also really matter anymore. So no, yeah, it was a really big impact on my life, and probably the only reason that I turned out semi-okay, to be honest.
Do you remember kind of using it as an escape?
Escape's like an interesting word. I don't necessarily think escape. I think more just of a balance. I think as there's paths that you can go down in life, and I think you can often, and this was from my experience in the police, you see people with a very similar upbringing that I had that went down a different path, but that was because they didn't see any different. They didn't have any lessons of learning from a different perspective. So I wouldn't necessarily, I'd say not really an escape for me, just more of a, this is actually the way that you should be, and this is life lessons, and this is that discipline gets you good things, and actually kind of hard work gets you this, and caring for teammates is good because it means you get positive reinforcement. So in a way an escape, but not in a way of like, oh, I get to kind of have this different life there. It was just very much kind of, I'm a very practically minded person, and it was like, hey, this is actually the way that the world should be, and this is how you should live it, not like when you see something else.
Yeah, but it is interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose being surrounded as a young kid by bad things, I suppose, substance abuse and drugs, and I imagine there was other kids where you lived being sent to like prison for doing bad things. What made you take that route rather than the criminal route?
Sometimes I don't know. Generally, I don't know. That's probably not the answer to your question, but I think something internally in me was always driven to do the opposite. I always felt that with hard work, I could change the situation where I was. I was never satisfied. I didn't want to live forever in the location that I lived. I didn't want to kind of have a limitation on seeing the people that were around me. I think that was always the driver. I think that it was always, if this isn't the be all and end all of life, like this is not what is out there. I think that was always it, seeing people that lived along the street from me who were in their 40s and just sat at home and drank all day, seeing people fighting at the end of the streets. I mean, multiple times walking through groups where they'd want to start a fight with you or not, or that to me wasn't the purpose of life, and nor was it kind of, it was more of a warning. It was like, well, if you don't push, and you don't work, and you don't try and do things, and you don't put yourself in different situations, you will be stuck here. So in a sense, it was like a fear, but it was a fear of stalemate and kind of staying somewhere. And also I think that the sport showed that, because if I trained hard, I was successful. And if I was successful, other things happened. I would go on trips. If I was good at one sport, I was taken on a trip to a different country by the school because I was good at the sport. So I could see that there was a pathway to doing well would do that. I think sometimes genuinely, I don't know, and this is a question that's been pondered many times, that something inside me didn't want to do the things that other people did. And when there was decisions that I could see a path one way over another, I was just always kind of happy saying, no, I'm not really bothered. I think I was lucky that because I was sporty, it was easier for me to say no to things, because I was kind of, as bad as it is, I was like, okay, because I did sport. So if I said no to smoking because I didn't want to smoke, it was okay. I wouldn't get picked on because I was captain of the rugby team, and they knew that everybody else who kind of did smoke also wanted to play rugby, and they were kind of that level of lads. So I kind of existed in a world that allowed me to say no to things, to push academically, which at my age was not something that as a peer group you were meant to do. People would take the mick out of you for it. But because I was good at sport, again, I was always left alone. I didn't have that pressure. So yeah, pretty much always probably sport. But yeah, not the cleanest of answers for you, I'm afraid, but it's something that maybe in another 10 years I'll have worked out why.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's really fascinating as well, because, you left school, you left home early, didn't you? You left home like 16, and you were able to work hard enough to send yourself to university. Is that right?
Yeah, so uni was a bit tricky because I wasn't legally dissociated from my family. So to get support at the time, you had to have a legal dissociation, which meant lawyers, whatever it is, kind of going and doing that process. So I didn't get grants. I didn't get financial support. So I'm assuming that's a loophole that's changed. I would like to hope so for many people, but it wasn't for me. So yeah, I had to work. So I worked effectively 2 part-time jobs to have like a full-time job. So like a morning shift in a retail space, and I would work like a evening into a nighttime shift in a different retail space. And then sometimes I would work in like restaurants as well, just to get extra money. But I'd go to uni in the day, and I would try as best as possible to train in and around that. So I always kind of developed, again, it was just a work ethic. It wasn't a choice. Most people have a choice of, well, if I'm at uni, I can go home if I need to, or I can pick up the phone and my parents are going to send me some money if I've got something. If my bank account was zero, it was zero. There was no external ability to help that. So there was not much choice. Just kind of had to do it, and did it. And then I had some money, and then I could continue on a path. So, and it just what it is. Like I don't feel, I I was particularly hard done by. I think there's people who had way, way worse than me. But yeah, worked a really early morning, would kind of do 4:30 till like 9 or 10, then go to uni. And then I would do like a 6 till usually like 11. I just didn't sleep very much. But usually that was not because of the drink that most students go through. It was just because I was tired.
So where were you living?
Manchester. So like from college, so the kind of last year of school, leaving home, managed to get into then like a college supported accommodation, also just slept at people's houses a lot. And then from that, just got my own flat, found my own private rental flat. The prices were very different when I was at that age, which makes me sound super old. I'm not. I think it's just crazy how much expensive things are. It's like 350 quid for a month. So it's like nothing. So yeah, I could afford it. I worked, I could afford it. I could afford to get myself a car. It was a super old car, but I could get myself a car. Like, again, I've been really lucky. There was always a route to something that I was able to kind of take advantage of. Yeah.
And then straight from uni, you went into the police force?
Yeah, pretty much. The Conservative government had come into power over Labour. This again shows how a lot long ago it was. They'd had a hold on recruitment for the police, so I was on hold for about a year. There was no police officer recruitment, certainly in Greater Manchester, for I think it was almost 2 years. And then we were the first 50, so there was 8,000 people that applied for 50 roles. So again, worked very hard to get one of those positions and be entered in. And I was one of the first 50 police officers in 2 years, which was quite an interesting thing because there wasn't a structure of learning. There wasn't a structure of experience because there'd been no recruitment for 2 years. So yeah, within a year was pretty much into the police, and that was a very interesting ride.
How long were you with the police force for?
So all in all, about 13 years. So I actually did about a voluntary year before as well, just to get into understanding policing, start to understand like legal frameworks, and effectively get some good grace for when it did open that would have had experience. So a lot of people who applied wouldn't be able to give direct examples of being in a policing situation, which I'd had, which was good. So yeah, about 13 years when you add it all together.
And looking back at your time in the police, I mean, did you enjoy that profession?
Yeah, it's a very interesting job. Quite a lot of what I did, I can't talk about, and that's not just trying to sound good. It's just it's something that I did. There's many individual examples where I can't. But yeah, I very quickly came out of uniform, so I wasn't in uniform very long. So I wasn't your typical beat Bobby for very long. Worked across the board with more serious crime, where I felt did have a good impact, but you just can't affect a lot of change. So I think that was one of the main reasons why I left, was that although I worked in serious crime, so child sexual exploitation, worked in serious DV offences, domestic violence offences, worked in what you call OCG, so organised criminal gangs, and then across the board with modern day slavery and human trafficking. So I was like a lead in modern day slavery. So if something came where something had been reported of a multi-occupancy house, people who were debt bondaged, people who had been brought in from various parts of Europe, I would lead that investigation and everything around it. So very like impactful, and enjoyed the job, but you see a lot of things that could be changed, things that could make things better. And it's such an archaic and rank structured organization that it's very difficult. Even if you have an idea, it's very difficult to get that idea to come into effect. So hence this, that I have an idea, I can do it, and we see how good it works. So it was freeing in that way, but no, I'm very grateful. It taught me an incredible lot of things, put me in a lot of crazy situations that I'm glad and proud of how I dealt with, and gave me a lot of skills that I think I've been able to use in other places. Not all the skills that can be used in other places, but quite a few of them.
Yeah, but it was heavy stuff that you were working on. Did you find that kind of triggering for your own mental health? Like, did you struggle at all personally?
No. Again, I think it's just the way I'm wired. And I like to just be very honest. Like, I could give people the answer of saying, and it's not because I'm trying to sound, tough or anything like that. I was just very good at putting things in boxes. My mind was very good at being professional, and this is what this is, and this is the way of the world. I think my upbringing showed me that. Like, I'd seen extreme violence from an early age, so I was very comfortable around violence in terms of being able to emotionally deal with seeing things and being able to emotionally deal with pressure and, having a drug addict mum and having an incredibly violent dad, like you learn how to speak to people to keep them from tipping on an edge. You learn how to know when a room feels different or when somebody's about to change or become unpredictable. And that all happens very kind of subconsciously. And then all of a sudden you can do it professionally. So I think that was why I was pretty good at my job. That didn't mean I didn't empathize with people. I really could empathize with people, but I just didn't fall down the route of kind of carrying it with me. It was always something that I was pretty good, again, because I had sport, I had training, I had competition, I had fitness, I had another side. So I always kind of said I had two masks. I had the police mask and then I had the everyday mask. And I very purposely didn't have a friend group made in the police. So everybody I saw outside of the police had nothing to do with the police. It was always people in different professions, people who had different walks of life. Quite often people in the police can be very centered in and around that. I didn't want that. Sometimes probably bit me in the bum a little bit because I didn't do Christmas parties and I didn't want to, go out on nights out with people, but it just kept me balanced. It allowed me to kind of have a good view of the world, that the world is really sweet and lovely and there's phenomenal things going out there, and instead of just focusing on what I saw in the day. So very lucky it didn't massively affect me. There were some things that were incredibly sad days and some days that were just not nice. But I was lucky that I had the balance in the sport and the training for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like every stage you've been through, you've basically learnt skills which have helped take you forward to the next step in your life. So what you've learned in your childhood took you to the police, and then what you learned in the police took you to battle cancer. What's next? What's next with battle cancer?
Yeah, so again, going into a new year, we're significantly investing in the venues. So, London, we're already in a gigantic venue, but across the UK, we've got all brand new venues. Just picking up, High Rocks has taken over the world. We are very far behind them in terms of funding. I'm
doing High Rocks in a few weeks, actually.
Lovely. They're a huge behemoth. They're owned by a VC company, so they have huge marketing budgets. They've got an ability to kind of deliver on a really grand scale. So we're kind of always just chasing behind that to stay on the delivery. We're not a High Rocks. We're not the same reason that you do it, but people will expect that level of event. So we want to try and keep up with that as much as we can. In terms of next year, a lot of growth that we're trying to aim from the program is just impacting the way that people apply to have support from us. So we want to really expand that out. We've chosen places so far, and now we want to open out that if somebody wants to host it, they can apply to host the program. Pushing really heavily with some academic studies with the program results as well, so we can really start to get some papers published. And a lot of my time is trying to convince MDs in various different specialities and different hospitals and different universities to review it, get behind us, kind of put their weight behind there. And then with Battle Cancer and the event itself, we're going to launch two sort of mini side challenges. So the day is now going to have the main challenge, which is going to be pretty much exactly what it was last year, with a few twists. But then we're also going to have a run. We're also going to have a lift. So just bringing in new communities, the running community is something that's growing so much. And we don't want to kind of force people to do things that's not what they enjoy. So we'll set up a challenge to do the thing that they enjoy. We'll hopefully be even more people at events, even higher lift, even better venues. And hopefully we can keep pushing with the program.
Yeah, and your partnerships are amazing, aren't you? You Nike, Whoop, a CrossFit a partner.
No, absolutely not.
But they do appreciate you, don't they?
No.
Do they not? Oh, I thought you had a good relationship with CrossFit.
We used to.
Oh, what happened?
We won't talk about that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, CrossFit's a company. Don't be ever fooled with CrossFit. They're a profit-making company. And if you don't participate or help to increase that profit, you're of no interest to them. There is very wonderful people who work for CrossFit. So just to kind of layer into that, there's some great people. Heather, J-Mac, there's tons of people who work at the games who've tried over the years to support. Prime example, Battle Cancer Program certification. We said, hey, we want to make this affiliated with CrossFit because there's so many CrossFit affiliates. it's $50 to do our certification. They came back, it's too cheap. We can't make enough money off it. So I was like, okay, fine. So that's just an example. Realistically, my own personal feelings after this year's CrossFit Games, I don't really want to be associated with a brand, which they are a brand that is still not addressed incredible safety failings that led to an athlete losing their life. So just personally, I'm not pro CrossFit as a company at the moment. I think a lot of people don't feel like that. I think there's great people there, but unfortunately the company of CrossFit still needs to do a little bit of work. And also Nike's phenomenal, Whoop's great. We've worked with so many different brands. Nike will continue to work with, hopefully Whoop will continue to work with, and just utilize those brands to make the experience even better for people. Of course the brands want to be seen and have products and stuff like that. But for me, I always want to just try and what can they offer to the consumer that consumes their brand? And this is a great way to uplift, and we'll keep making sure that they spend some money making people's experience better.
Cool. Oh, it's exciting to watch. Considering, when you hear your story, I think it sounds like you're very good at putting things in boxes, but you have had challenging times throughout your background. What other strategies, apart from exercise, have you used to get to where you are today?
Yeah, I think two direct things would be other people. So not being afraid to rely on other people, obviously very carefully choosing who those other people are, for sure. Not being afraid to ask for advice, not being afraid to ask experts, not being able to be afraid to kind of explain the situation that you're going through, or, kind of ask how somebody else would approach a situation. Because I think there's advice and then there's actually how would you tackle a problem. That's something I've always done. Again, I think it was born from sport by being the more coachable you are, the more successful you basically end up being. So being very open to asking, well, how do I get better at this? Or, is there a different way I can approach this? I keep missing this, so how can I do it? So you can bring that into life. And I think that's something that we always try and pride holds on to us, that we don't do that. But on top of that, I would also say individually for me, daily goal setting is huge. And I don't mean today I'm going to become a millionaire. I mean, just in terms of what am I going to achieve today? Because quite often goals become very long and far, which is great. And that's the point, you want to have that. But long range goals don't happen without day-to-day goals. And I love to look back at that to-do list that's been today's goals. And when I've ticked it off, that reinforces a productivity. It can sometimes reinforce that I've not done as much as I think I should, but predominantly that's really helped me. And it's helped me in times of difficulty where to know, well, I call it wins. So every time I tick something off from that daily goal, it's a win. And the more wins that you stack up, suddenly you've not been defeated. So again, very sport centered, but asking people, relying on other people that you trust and being open to other people, but then also just creating a winning mentality by everyday goals, ticking them off. And then suddenly problems don't seem so difficult because you've been able to overcome a lot of things. And I think that's the two things I always try and say to people, because people often say to me, oh, motivation, how are you motivated? And I say, I don't think I am particularly motivated. There's times when I am, but there's times when I'm just disciplined. I think there's a discipline to motivation thing, but the discipline makes me feel like I'm motivated because I've done all these things. So I don't know if that's useful to anybody, but it's been pretty useful to me over the past few years.
I had that debate with another guest, with Marcus Smith, about what comes first, discipline or motivation. And I think you could just swing it either way, can't you? Yeah,
it depends on the person. I think on the view of life and the internal driver to why you do something. From a competition side, I do things because I don't want to lose. I don't do things because I want to win. And there's a big difference there, in mentality, even though the result can kind of be the same. So yeah, there's tons of different ways of looking at it. So hopefully somebody will have thought, oh yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, but also I agree with the daily goals. And I talk a lot about that, about being present. And I think if you set too long-term goals, then you're not present. You're always in front. But actually we need to kind of be where our feet are. We need to be here and now and really focus on enjoying and just, doing the moment.
you're also delaying the gratification. So I think that's just one reason why I talk about that a little bit. So you delay the gratification so far away, and we're human. We like to be rewarded and treated. And I think when you keep the treat and the reward constantly very far away, it's very easy to slip off. So when that becomes something almost daily, it's significantly better on your mind. That's my main sort of reason with it.
Thank you. Scott, the last question, final question I always ask everyone. If you could go back in time to when things were at their toughest, what do you wish you could have told yourself as you were going through those difficult times?
Very good question. It's weird because I always kind of set myself that I'd never ever go back mentality. I think just reassurance. I think like there's times when things are difficult and they feel hard in the moment. So you can, even though you can kind of keep pushing through, you're still never sure whether the effort is worth what you get on the other side. So I think that would be the only thing, would be kind of a reassurance that like actually hard work and effort is going to pay off, because there was many times where it didn't, or it didn't feel like it was going to, or I don't know, you did something and it never quite felt like, oh, I've got to a point where I'm comfortable, or, you know, all the days working and I never felt, well, oh, I'm going to have enough money to be able to do X. But you keep going. So I think probably just being a little person on the shoulder to say like, no, promise you it's worth it. Like, hang on and you'll be fine. I think that's probably the only thing. Enjoy the ride. Yeah. But there's no else reason for doing it, to be honest. Exactly. Thank you, Scott. Thanks so much for talking to us today. Of course. Whenever I speak to someone who has done battle cancer or someone who works there, they always talk about your inspirational talk at the beginning. And I urge anyone doing battle cancer to hear Scott's inspirational talk, because it is a real tearjerker. I love battle cancer. I think it brings so much joy and positivity into people's lives who have or who are dealing with just, you know, this awful disease. So really, thank you. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you. It's very kind, but it's not me. It's loads of other people. I just had an idea. Loads of other people do it. But thank you very much. But we couldn't do it without you. Thanks, Scott. Thank you, Emma.